Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our fourth The Future Thinkers.life. This is hosted by the .life organisation. The Future Thinkers.life aims to encourage business owners, leaders and employees to consider what the future will look like in 5, 10, 20 years' time for our chosen subject. I'm Matthew Hoddenott, and I shall be asking the questions this evening, encouraging our panelists in open and frank discussion about their visions, their aspirations, and perhaps trepidations as to what the future may hold. Ideally, our discussion will leave all those listening in a positive and inspired frame of mind when we finish, with a plan to position yourselves for the future. Each month we choose a topical subject for discussion, having looked previously at the future of employment, events, and the high street. Our fourth subject, I think, will prove equally interesting and topical this evening. As always, I try to dress in a manner to suit either current affairs or our chosen subject. And with the country about to announce the lifting of travel restrictions, many employees and employers will be looking to recharge their batteries and wellness with a sunshine holiday. And I apparently have come prepared for silver service at our favourite beachside restaurant. And it's the recharging and wellness that we'll be discussing today, with our topic being the future of mental wellness in the business environment. Coming from a senior management position in the construction industry and having had a habitual relationship with alcohol in the past, this evening's topic is extremely close to myself. Today, our fireside chat, I'm joined by the head of HR for Suzuki GB, Susan Bryson. From Stress Matters, mental health and wellbeing coach and stress buster, Laura Capell-Abra, wellness consultant and project manager for Northamptonshire Police Force, Phil Croney, and last but not least, Thrive's founder and wellbeing director, Simon Nichols. And as usual, I'll let you introduce yourselves, starting with you, Laura, if you can take the floor.
Of course. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. I am from the marketing industry originally, and experienced my own struggles with mental health and my well-being, as many of us in the well-being field. That's where we come from. And 5 years ago, I left my kind of senior agency, World Life, and set up Stress Matters basically to try and help kind of workplaces understand how they can make wellbeing easy. My issue was that actually I really wanted to do a good job when I was managing director, but I just didn't know what to do and how to do it. So I thought it was really important to try and help people understand how to do this in a really easy way, and a way that isn't going to take away from your kind of your day job and your day business activities. So yes, I did a little retraining about 5 years ago, as you say, things like mental health first aiding and coaching, and lots of different tools and techniques like that. And yeah, we work with lots of different businesses at different sizes now.
Fantastic. Thanks ever so much, Laura. I really appreciate you joining us this evening. Phil, there is method in my madness as to how I'm going around. I'm doing at the moment alphabetical order by our first names. So Phil, it's you.
Hey, my name is Phil Croney. I currently work for Northamptonshire Police. My job title is Senior Transformation Manager, and I'm currently working on a series of estates projects, transforming the estates with a clear view on improving wellbeing and diversity in the workplace. My specialism essentially is fitness and wellbeing. I originally trained as a personal trainer, and my work just over the years naturally evolved more into general wellbeing, corporate wellbeing, and naturally also falls into the field of mental health awareness in the workplace as well. So my current role is slightly different to what I normally do, because it's very much implementing a series of strategies which are probably generational, really. So we're looking at how to transform things for the next generation for my organisation.
Brilliant, Phil. And I had the pleasure of going to Phil's latest project last week, and I'm absolutely blown away by everything that Phil's actually achieved, Phil and his team have achieved. So maybe we'll hear a little bit more about that later on, Phil. Simon, it's your turn next. Please introduce yourself.
Getting that, my Sherlock Holmes type skills, thoughts, Simon before Susan. Brilliant. Thank you for the heads up as well. So my name's Simon Nichols, and I'm the founder and wellbeing director of Thrive. We're a mental health and wellbeing company, and probably not too dissimilar sort of story from Laura. Actually, I was a corporate for 26 years. I was VP of EMEA for channel sales in a large software and hardware organisation. Worked at senior level for most of that time. And I had a thing in 2016, a mental health issue, and that changed my outlook on life. I then started to think about how I can actually make people's lives better. For about 26 years, as I said, I was selling things to people, which might have made their lives better, probably made the organisation's bottom line revenue better, but not really helping people. So after my 2016 epiphany, I decided to try and go back into the corporate as well as the individual and see if we could just make one person's life better each day. And we do that from a range of mental health first aid training, workshops, we do neurodiversity training, we have calm and confident programs where over a period of time we actually allow people to work on their self-confidence and their self-esteem. We also do a lot of mental health strategy as well into corporates, SMEs, and individuals as well on our open courses. So it's certainly a little bit different to the corporate world, but I do love working back into the corporate world with the skills I gained in there.
Brilliant, Simon. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Susan, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everybody. So as Matthew has said, I'm head of HR at Suzuki GB. I have been there all the time, worked my way through the ranks. I was originally an executive assistant, and I loved dealing with people. I love the diversity and the challenges that various people bring. So over the last 15, 20 years, I've worked my way up to the head of HR. And one of the things that attracted me to Suzuki was the culture, was the team ethics, was how people looked out for each other. And I have a personal invested interest in well-being. I haven't suffered from mental health most of my life, but not actually realizing it. So for me, everything that's happening at the moment is a positive. So things that I've experienced, I can then practice within the workforce. And I think the biggest thing is trying to get rid of the stigma that comes with mental health. But Suzuki, like I say, is very supportive, and we have lots of initiatives that we put in place. But our biggest one is going to be over the next 9 months, getting people back into the workforce. That's going to be our biggest challenge.
And everything that involves dealing with that, really, isn't it?
Yes.
I think it's going to be such a massive change, isn't it, Susan?
It is, yes.
Okay. So oddly today, when I was preparing for this, and yes, I have prepared for it, I promise, Gallup has published a book called Wellbeing at Work, and within the blurb it says, and I'll just read this to you, so my apologies, it looks like I'm reading, what if the next global crisis is a mental health pandemic? It's here now. The mental health pandemic manifests itself everywhere, not least in your workplace. As organisations around the world face health and social crisis as well as economic uncertainty, acknowledging and improving well-being in your workplace is more critical than ever. Susan, I'll come to you first. Is this true?
I actually think it is. I do think it is. I think there's always been mental health within the workplace, but it's never been recognised. It's never been acknowledged. I'd mentioned before about the stigma. Lots of people don't understand mental health, but I think because of probably what they've experienced in the last 12 months with lockdown, they're starting to understand it more. And it's now becoming a real live issue. It's not being swept under the carpet. It's being addressed. There's being things put in place. Hopefully, I know there is at Suzuki, and I hope everybody else is getting involved in this. But yes, I definitely do think there is a mental health pandemic at the moment. I just hope that our government, I'm not politically minded, but I just hope our government actually realise the amount of investment that is needed. So for me, if you've broken an arm, you can go to the hospital. if you've got mental health issues, you go on a waiting list for months and months and months. And I just think that there needs to be more investment and more awareness. And I think this pandemic has helped to highlight the mental health issues that have probably always been there, but not as severe as what they are now.
What do you feel, Laura?
I think you're completely right. I agree with you, Susan. I agree with Gallup as well. I actually think it's going to get worse. I definitely think, even if I look back to a year ago, the conversations I was having with people a year ago, we ran a support line last year for 6 months. And the kind of conversations we were having on that were obviously quite emotionally charged, and everything was just starting to happen. And actually, if I look at the support services we offer individuals and businesses and things now, actually the kind of conversations we're having in a way are much scarier, because the fear factor of the unknown is leaving most people, but it's the long-term impact that they're having. And that's what I think we've got to be conscious that I don't think we're in the midst of it right now. I think we're at the start of it, and it's going to get worse as the knock-on effect of everything that's happened over the last year starts to get realised and people start to understand the long-term impact. So I think we probably are, but I don't think we've seen the worst of it yet. I think it's going to get a little bit worse before it gets better.
Really? And do you think that this is, I mean, from what you're saying, both you, Susan, and Laura, that this isn't something that the press has just sort of jumped on and we see, I mean, we've had these issues all the time, but actually the awareness of it now is there. It's not just something that's press generated then. Laura.
Yeah. I mean, from my side, I speak to every single person, I speak to people every single day. That makes me think, well, no, I wasn't necessarily having this conversation before. What I think is interesting, and to Susan's point, we've always had, like, we all have mental health, and a lot of us have had mental ill health at various points in time. But I think because the conversation been opened up maybe by the press and by society generally, it's becoming a slightly more acceptable conversation. So to the point that Susan was saying about stigma, the stigma's starting to reduce. It's still there, but it's starting to reduce, which means we can have the conversation more freely. So I think that's where it can suddenly feel like it's got really bad, because you're just hearing about it maybe a little bit more now as well, because those conversations are happening. But I do think, if I think about our clients, we are seeing it get worse. The conversations we have every day are becoming probably that little bit franker, that little bit more urgent, the conversations we are having. So I do think the press play a part in it, but I would like to be positive and think they're actually helping create the space for the conversation, and that those individuals are then reacting by having those conversations.
Yeah, I think so. And Simon, what's your view?
The World Health Organization announced a mental health pandemic in 2014. That was when we started to think that there was something wrong. 2019, they actually released the mental health equality, i.e. having access to mental health in every country around the world. As we know, depression, stress, anxiety is one of the leading causes of heart disease, and heart disease itself is the biggest killer globally. We're talking 16% of all global deaths are through heart disease, and with depression, stress, and anxiety leading causes of that, bringing down that, our thoughts, changing the way that we think, will actually lower death rates. It's fundamentally the core of what we should be doing as a society. We know the second largest cause of death for 15 to 29-year-olds is suicide. There is, it's not just I guess the press is maybe exaggerating it at the moment, but we're in it. We've been living in it for 70. In fact, we've probably been living in it for 100 years, but we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg now, and more people are talking about it. More people are open about it, as Laura said, and actually willing to have that conversation without fear of discrimination or stigma. So yes, I'm definitely in the camp of, this is a pandemic, and this will continue to get worse as we move forward.
I'm blown away a little bit, Simon, by I appreciate it's always been there, as both Laura and Susan have said, and I appreciate this, but actually labelled by the World Health Organization 7 years ago, and that really does, yeah, that I'm a bit lost for words, actually. Normally I'm not stumbling over my words, but just that 7 years. Phil, has that been a driver behind your organisation, perhaps, and the work that you've been doing?
Yes, absolutely. So I agree with what Simon's saying, that it is existing. We're not at the start of something. We are very much in the middle of something. Some organisations are better at understanding that than others. And I think going back to something that Susan said, there's some people out there that do recognise that this is happening, and others that don't. And actually, hospital isn't the place you go straight away for a mental health issue or a series of mental health issues. There are lots of things really that can happen before that to catch you before you get to that stage. Unlike a broken arm, it happens. It's quite an acute injury. A mental health issue is something that can deteriorate over time. So we're not at the start of something. As Simon says, we're very much in the middle of something. It is a pandemic. It is happening, and some people out there are very, very good at managing it and organising it in their organisation. Others are at the very start of their journey, and that's something that we need to explore later on in this conversation.
So Phil, is this? Do you think that? I mean, we've spoken on the Future Thinkers a lot about the pandemic, and pretty much every subject that we've touched on so far has been about the pandemic, or has started about the pandemic. Has the pandemic just raised awareness of this, or what's brought it to the forefront of the media and everything else at the moment?
Well, the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, is a catalyst.
Yeah,
to talk about it more often. So where everyone was kind of thinking about it, talking about it, the current COVID pandemic really brought up a series of issues as companies, organisations really started to think about what they needed to do to keep themselves safe and secure as an organisation. And they're doing that really from a lot of organisations doing that from a health and safety perspective. It's been driven kind of by what do we need to do to keep ourselves safe. So there's been a huge overhaul of safety and health related issues in the workplace that fortunately in one positive way has been driven by the last sort of 14-15 months.
And is that what you found with Suzuki, Susan? Has this been a long-term program for you? Or?
Right, Suzuki have always had employee engagement and well-being at the forefront. That has driven a lot of the agenda issues that Suzuki do. So for us to tune into mental health and start putting initiatives in place isn't something new for us. It's something that we've done long-term. It's something that has been recognised as a good employee engagement tool, to keep people looking after their well-being. We get that productivity, we get that return on investment, we get that engagement. So it's in the business's interest to keep the well-being of our employees at the forefront in everything that we do. And it is very much a driving force.
Yeah. And with something like that, I mean, you're talking about a huge investment, aren't you? Really, yes. as a business to do that.
Yes.
How do you make within your business to start with, and perhaps Phil and Laura and Simon have got something to add on this. How do you actually encourage the board decision that this is the way forward? How they're going to get that return on investment through this?
I mean, I've got to say, I've not been at Suzuki that long.
Yeah.
So I don't know how they originally got the board buy-in, but whilst I've been there, and when I was there last year, buy-in was never an issue. It wasn't a hard sell. It was always there. 5-6 years ago, Suzuki realized that they needed to start changing things because things weren't right. And they just saw the benefits of investing in the employees. So like I say, I don't think it was ever a hard sell. It's for Suzuki, it's a win-win situation.
Yeah.
It all goes all hand in hand with the people strategy that we have. But of course, like everybody has mentioned, what has happened over the last 12 months has meant that we've had to look at it in a different way, and we've had to approach it differently, with everybody being, remotely working at home. And we've got employees that, we're looking to bring back into the workplace, and they've been out of the workplace for 12 months. So this is going to be our next challenge: how we manage their well-being, how we integrate them back into the business. And we've got some ideas in mind, but that's going to be our next challenge. And I think because of that, when I speak to the board, I have to say to them, these are going to be our issues. The transition, people are going to be anxious, people are going to be nervous, and it's how we deal with that transition that's going to be important.
I think Simon's just put into the chat about the investment, or the return on investment of 5 to 1 on that. Is that just through experience? Is that documented, Simon?
That is totally documented there. So Deloitte run a mental health for employers report 2020, January 2020 came out. That was lifted straight from there. The cost of mental ill health, or poor mental health rather, amongst employers costs between 42 and 45 billion pounds each year. And what that's actually made up for is the average weighted cost per employee for poor mental health is £1,652, depending on which industry.
Per employee.
Per employee. Depends on which industry you're in. So if we take a look at Suzuki, which probably comes under the transport, distribution and storage, the high weighting is 2,400 and the low weighting is 1,800 for that industry per person for poor mental health. We're talking about presenteeism, people turning up to the office and just being there. We're talking about absences. We're talking about absenteeism, where people take the day off because they just get to Sunday and they can't do Monday and Tuesday. And then we're also talking about staff turnover. Staff turnover costs £9 billion a year, with people leaving environments where they don't feel supported, they don't feel safe. So when we start to think about how we can actually, and where that return on investment, so every £1 spent, you get £5 return on investment. You can't get that anywhere else in the business. You can't refresh your infrastructure or do digital transformation where you can get that level. And not only are you empowering your people, you're getting more out of them. Someone put in the chat earlier, productivity. Positivity of a workforce increases productivity 33%. Now, I know that, when some manufacturers start to look at that, that's 33% more Suzuki's off the production line. No, that's not that, but it's your workforce is more productive. It's engaged, it's innovative, it's going to be doing things differently. It's going to be empowered to work. None of that Sunday evening, I don't want to go to work. It's going to empower them through the weekend as well. Just a huge amount of positive influence can go a huge way in a business. But don't take my word for it. The Deloitte Employers Report, which we'll put into the links after this, amazing reading, really worth everyone checking it out.
Well, Simon, yeah. Again, your grasp of the figures always amazes me. I know I come from the construction industry, I mentioned earlier, and our initial sort of steps into the well-being, into the mental health arena was about managing stress and managing stress on a work site, managing productivity as a result of stress and things like that. And then we got to the position where stress actually became really reportable. We actually got to the position where that we could trace back sort of all the pressure of that you'll find on commercial building sites being taken directly back to stress. And so the story is slowly changing in the construction industry. Is that the same thing that I'll come to you, Laura, next? Sorry, I've just caught you just as you were taking a drink. But is that the sort of driver that you now find your customers, they're coming to you for this positive reason that Simon's mentioning, or is it still a slightly Simon and Susan and Phil, sorry, are mentioning, or is it still slightly negative about looking after the health issues rather than improving the positive benefits?
There's definitely been a shift. There's still people that come to us and say, we've had a couple of team members go off with sick leave, we need to do something. And sometimes the story is a little bit more intense than that as well. And so we definitely get people that come to us that are reacting to a situation. But I do think we have seen a change about more people being proactive. And Simon, yeah, the stats, the Deloitte stats, they are true. And we do a lot of, when we bring a new client on, we do an onboarding process with them, and we do a diagnostic tool to essentially taking a lot of those Deloitte figures and some other figures and saying, well, this is the likely cost of stress in your business. And Simon saying, that £1,700 cost is a huge impact. So people will either come to us with a reaction saying something's happened and we need to support the team and what can you do to help them. The better conversations we have are those people that come to us and say, we don't understand well-being. What is it? What should we be doing? And then we get to educate them about things like the costs. And actually, as we've been saying, of course, if you've got a happier workforce, you've got a more productive workforce, you've therefore got a more profitable business. So actually, going back to something you were saying earlier, actually about the selling, once you get to have the conversation about the figures, it's not a hard sell. To Susan's point, actually the selling, most people are kind of there. Now, of course, you get some people that are, stress doesn't exist, which I always love, because I'm like, right, let me at them. Let's have this conversation. It does exist.
Here comes the stress buster.
A stress buster, exactly. So we get to have the conversation. But I think one thing that has been really interesting over the last year is there will always be somebody that'll say to me in a workshop, for example, well, I don't get stressed. So, I think it's just this thing that other people or younger people get, for example. And I find it really interesting recently where we might be running a stress workshop, for example, and we'll talk about coping strategies and things people do to look out for themselves, and how people will say, well, I never used to get stressed, but it feels strange now. Like I feel like maybe I'm stressed. And they're starting to realize that all the coping strategies that they had relied on, things like commuting to work, listening to music in the car, reading on the train, whatever it is, were their coping strategies, but they hadn't proactively thought about it like that. So they were managing their stress potentially before, but because a lot of those coping strategies have been naturally removed, they haven't thought about them and hadn't replaced them. So the stress levels kind of increased. And that's when, as we all know, that actually it isn't comfortable for anybody if we're experiencing stress. And when that's been for a prolonged period of time, that's when you're more at risk of mental ill health. And that's why we call the organisation Stress Matters, because I think some people go, how can we try and support people with mental ill health? Which absolutely we should be doing that. But if we can support people at that stress level, like you were saying with the construction industry, and it doesn't get to the point of mental ill health, then that's a far healthier, happier place to be than waiting for somebody to be diagnosed with some kind of mental health illness and then having to try and react to that point. So we've definitely seen a shift, but I think there's a sense of people have just always seen stress as acceptable and inevitable. And actually it's kind of us saying, well, it doesn't have to be. We don't have to accept that. We can work in a way that, yes, there's pressure, yes, there's deadlines. And for me, I used to work in the events industry, so I loved the adrenaline that you'd get from a deadline, and I really loved that bit. But it doesn't mean I needed to experience stress the whole time to enjoy my job. And it's getting that balance in people's minds of not seeing it as a bad, or seeing it as a bad enough thing that you want to do something about it, but not seeing it as it's the end of the road. Actually, it's about taking it back that step from stress so it doesn't get to mental ill health.
Laura, do you think that, sorry to interrupt them, do you think though it's trying to educate people as well to recognize the difference between healthy stress and unhealthy stress?
Yeah. So interesting, I've always had a challenge with the good and bad stress. So we're members of the International Stress Management Association, and they have a very clear line, which is there is no good stress. I am a little bit more on the fence of it. That's why I tend to say, actually, there's good pressure and there's good adrenaline and there's good kind of deadline pressure. But actually, the stress is your body's reaction, and you can go into fight or flight mode. Now, doing that every so often is absolutely fine. And that's what stops us walking in front of the road, like in front of a car on the road, and can do that. So there's the good reaction in the sense of it's protecting us. But when it's consistent, that's when it is bad. Or, for anybody that has done a stress workshop or mental health training, you'll know that actually there's that tipping point when actually we start to experience what we call our stress signature. So all the things that happen to us stress wise. So I think that's when people, if we refer to it as good stress, I think people then trick themselves that they must still be in good stress. I think actually it's probably an easier way of thinking about it, going, okay, I thrive under pressure, and I thrive with the adrenaline, but actually if it's having a physical impact on me, maybe that's not good. But I'm with you, because as I say, the International Stress Management Association say no stress is good, and I'm a little bit like, oh, I'm not sure.
I know there's a Dr. William Bird who has a GP practice, I think, in Oxfordshire, and he's a huge advocate of how to manage your stress, and the fact that and I will get this wrong, forgive me, because I don't have the same experience as all of you, but I think his tone is all about free radicals and the stress impact on free radicals, then putting stress and strain on the body. And one of his answers to this, as a community as a whole, is, you know, we should be going walking in nature, and we should actually be prescribing things like walks. So really, as a business, and I guess I'm coming to you, Phil, on this, because you're doing it and you're living this at the moment. As a business, what should you be putting in place to get all of the positive aspects that Susan and Laura and Simon have been talking about, Phil?
It's really a combination of things, and it's something that will float everybody's boat. It's not something that's specific. So it's a range of initiatives and a range of facilities that will motivate someone or that someone can pick up on that's right for them. So you've already mentioned about prescribing walking, for example. So for some people, well-being and managing their mental health could be something as simple as having the opportunity within the culture of their organisation to be able to go out and take that walk or take that break. For other people who are already more active, it may be looking at other ways they can become more active through active travel. And having the facilities in place to be able to do that. So, for example, if you're walking or cycling to work, which has huge benefits to the individual, company and the environment, what are you doing as an organisation to encourage that culturally and have the facilities in place to allow you to do that? So, for example, Matt, you've seen some of the active travel arrangements we have in my workplace, something that's really pushed hard. But it's not just having a cycle to work scheme. It's having the showers, it's having the area where you can hang up your damp, wet clothes if it's raining that morning. It's about having that flexible work pattern to be able to come in a little bit later or perhaps leave a little bit earlier to avoid traffic. So it's a whole range of facilities, it's a whole range of cultures that need that people can pick up on, regardless of their background, regardless of the diversity of the people in your organisation. And everybody on this call and everybody on the panel will have a different, something different to them that's important in regards to how they lift their mental well-being and how they manage stress. So it's having that range of facilities and cultures. And a lot of that is through very strong leadership. Some of it's through having having creative thinkers in the workplace, having strong project managers. But most importantly of all, it's about engagement. It's about engaging with your people and having those creative thinkers come to you as an organisation, or as an organisation going to find them, because they do exist in different organisations. You've got to find who they are. Some people are very vocal and they'll want to get involved. Others will be slightly more nervous about getting involved. But you won't get that diversity unless you go and find it.
I think it's really interesting you say that, because we've got Dan Trell. Forgive me if I've mispronounced your name, Dan Trell, but we've got Dan Trell saying it's about proper care of support of employees, and I guess really, Susan, that you'll see this within your business. The more that you put in place as a package of support for your staff, the more attractive it is as a business to come and work for, the more exciting it is as a business to come and work for. Is that been your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. We work as a team at Suzuki. We have open plan offices, directors sit in the same area of all of us. So there is no hierarchy. We all work together. We have open door, like I say open door policies, but there aren't any doors. But, you can come and speak to a director, you can come and speak to the general managers. They're all accessible. And from the HR perspective, you know, they come to us and they'll say there might be an issue here, and we jump on it straight away. But yeah, we have lots of incentives that we put in place. You know, we've mentioned employee engagement. We ask for suggestions. We run a wellbeing calendar. We have all various things that go on all the time. And sometimes it's investing time. It doesn't always have to be financial rewards or recognition. Sometimes it's just, you know, send an employee an email saying, how are you today? How was your weekend? You know, it's just giving them that time. And some things, you know, like that you can't buy, you know.
It's that respect, isn't it?
Yeah, and you know, we think, oh, I'm just saying hello to them or good morning, and they mightn't be bothered to speak, you know, but it's surprising just how investing that 5 minutes, you know, corridor conversation can just make a difference in that person's lives.
And just picking up on that, Susan, I think that's you know, we've gone, and I don't want to dwell much more on the COVID if we can help it, but we've gone from having that water cooler chat, for example, where we know what's going on with each other's relationships almost, and we know how they are, to having this perfect isolation. Has that been something really that has sort of heightened the awareness?
Yeah, like I say, we've had to adapt how we communicate with our workforce. A lot of our incentives that we do are now online. So we'll do Zumba online. We do quizzes online through Teams. We use Teams an awful lot. You know, we'll hire a trainer, we'll hire time with a consultant, and employees can just phone in, you know, we'll see, we've blocked this time out, get in touch with, you know, the counsellor if you want a 45-minute slot. So whilst we're not there in person to handhold people, we're making them aware that even though it's not, you know, out of sight, out of mind, absolutely not. The priority is still there to maintain employees' well-being.
I think Libby Morley has put something within the chat about ISO 45003. Forgive me if I've missed a couple of zeros on there, but is that something that you're all aware of? Is that something that we're going to see creeping into the workplace, or almost rampaging into the workplace? Laura, I see you're nodding there. Is that something you're aware of?
Yeah, it's something we're aware of. I'd love to think it's rampaging. I'm not sure if it will rampage. Okay. I think it might take a little bit of time to filter through. It's still just launching properly at the moment anyway. But I think it's a really good thing. I think actually giving people that framework and giving people the kind of the structure a little bit more works well for a lot of businesses. Some people love the creativity and the kind of independence to come up with their own strategies and their own plans, and that's great. But I think for a lot of businesses, particularly larger businesses, having that framework and that target and that process to go through is a really positive thing. And we've seen really positive things in terms of sustainability using it, for example. So I think actually that kind of tool can be really practical. It's not going to be great for every business at all, and we're never going to see every business using it and aligning to it. But I think the businesses that would be aligning to that kind of program anyway, the kind of the larger organizations, I think it'll be good for them to channel their thoughts. And then the smaller organizations, there are other opportunities to way to kind of framework their approach anyway. But I think it's a good thing that there is an approach that's being considered. I think the thing that I'm sure Simon will probably agree with, the thing that I'm desperate for them to do is make mental health first aiders mandated, and saying that you have to have them, you know, a certain amount in the workforce. And I think for me that will be a real positive turning point when actually people are told you need mental health first aiders like you need physical first aiders. And I think for me that will be when that parity happens. Actually, the ISO stuff will be great, but it'll be directly impacting businesses and the individuals, therefore, in the businesses.
Yeah,
is that your experience, Simon?
I totally agree, Laura. Yeah, I mean the whole thing about ISO 45003 is obviously it's all assessing psychosocial risks at work. The problem is if you read it as a layperson, I mean, even you know, I've done a fair bit on sort of mental health at work. And I read ISO 45003, and it was just, it's great, as Laura said, for those organisations that want to be recognised. For those organisations actually that don't care about ISO in any form, won't do anything with it. And even the ones that do, you've got to put a whole programme and package of work around your people. Because once again, yes, it's absolutely fantastic if we could have And it's a shame that we use the word mandated, isn't it? Because that then you've got a fine line between tick box and want to. So the organisations we're seeing at the moment, which probably includes Suzuki as well, I don't know, Susan, if you have mental health first aiders, but a lot of those progressive well-being organisations are already rolling out mental health first aider programs. And those that are on that forward curve are going to get the best benefits the quickest. This is not me plugging mental health first aid training in any way, shape or form. It's just you're going to have people in the organisation that are going to understand other people's pain, other people's problems. And this is not to say that we don't need GPs anymore, anything like that. And we're certainly, from Susan's, fantastic, the counsellors and that. I mean, I guess you've got quite a robust employee assistance program. An employee assistance program is exactly that. It's an insurance policy. If something is wrong with your employees, let's assist them. Why don't we put things in place first so that we can be proactive? So we don't need them to get there. Keep the safety net there, as Phil said, absolutely. But let's try and get to them first. And yes, I think anything that's talking about parity, if there is, this is going in as part of the occupational health management at work. So it will be part of health and safety. And if all the health and safety executives are starting to talk about it, then it's going to be on the agenda. HSE only included parity of mental health and physical first aiders in 2019. So we're still only 2 years in to the largest governing body of all of the accreditations actually agreeing that it should be there. Just a very quick bit of trivia for people. One of the reasons why mental health and physical health are treated so differently is during the formation of the NHS in 1948, it was agreed that we should treat physical first aid and whatever that mind stuff was, which didn't even have a name back then, but they should be treated differently. And we've split apart. And I think only in the last maybe 10 years are we starting to see that coming together. But I think, in the last 3 years, we just come on leaps and bounds.
I think part of that, Simon, and I know Phil's got his hand up as well, so I'll come to Phil in a second. But I think part of that is the whole field of positive psychology is so young, isn't it? We're the idea about positive psychology and the really positive impact that I'm going to use the word happy, but happier, comfortable in our environments, having better mental health within our environment, that goes hand in hand with positive psychology. So it is a really young.
It's just me, Matthew.
A young field, isn't it? I think as I turn that back to better employee wellbeing. Sorry, I missed that, Laura.
We just lost you for a moment, but you're back.
Honestly, my hands were going wild as well. My computer just can't keep up. So it was, when we put it all together, it just makes perfect sense. Phil, you had your hand up a second ago, very patiently.
Yeah, so something that that Laura mentioned about the fact that mental health isn't necessarily mandated. Well, actually it is, because keeping your business safe and secure from a health and safety perspective should incorporate everything to do with health and safety in general, everything you need to do to keep your employees safe, whether they're at work, traveling to work, or working for you. And it popped up on the screen from Libby earlier on. First aid mental health responders or first aiders. It is a slightly misleading term because it's part of what an organisation should be doing to keep their staff safe and secure. And we talk a lot about first aiders being the way to do that. But actually there should be, and there probably is in most organisations, a process and procedure that captures when people are at risk. If there isn't, there should be. Simon's work is very diverse in what he does in terms of training for organisations. So it can help organisations understand what they should be doing and what the risks are. So that it is mandated. It is mandated that mental health is considered, that there are risk assessments put in place, and there should be facilities and cultures to capture that. But I think if you can attack it from that angle, companies and organisations would pick up on it a lot more. And there's so many organisations that are at risk, having not done that to the depth and level that they require. So HSE does stipulate it, but not necessarily what you should be doing. And that's the key. That's the thought that needs to go into it.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. And I think that's where, as saying, having that framework or having something where at the moment where it's so general, as you say, that actually we should be absolutely considering it in our risk assessments, we should be considering it as part of our duty of care. Of course, we all know that should be happening, and that's obviously a lot of the work that we focus on. But I think actually having something as simple as businesses should have mental health first aiders as part of that, yes, and to Simon's point, yeah, it's going to be a tick box for some, of course it's going to be, but I would also say at least they're in there. You know, it's not ideal, but at least they're there. And so the individuals are looking out for the other individuals. And I think if I kind of play back to when I was running an agency and I'd already been off with myself, my own experience, I then had team members going off on sick leave with stress. And I sat there thinking, hang on a minute, like, I'm a good person and I've experienced this and more people are experiencing this under my care. What's happened? And I think for me, if somebody at that point had said, right, you know, the starting point is get some mental health first aiders. And I wouldn't have known what they were talking about, but I would like to hope then having those mental health first aiders might have then started the rest of the conversation. Now, I'm sure Simon's very similar to me, that actually what I'd rather start with is let's gather the insights, understand what's going on with your team, understand the health and well-being of everyone, understand what their requirements are, put together a strategy, measure it, all of these wonderful things. But I think actually sometimes that, depending on the size of the organisation and the kind of the level of complexity already in there, actually sometimes just saying have a mental health first aider as a starting point gives them a way in. It's a conversation at that point that for, you know, a few £100, somebody's in there who has that knowledge, who might be able to help an individual if they are really needing that support. So I think it's not necessarily the right way to do it, but I think it would be a good, easy way for that conversation to start in businesses where maybe it wouldn't normally start from in a proactive way.
No, I think you're wrong there slightly, Laura, because I think that it's a bottom-up. That's a bottom-up approach. I think you're exactly right in what you're saying. It is a way to open up a conversation, but it's not a cultural change that's coming down from the organisation. I think it's a way of starting a conversation, but it's the wrong way, and unfortunately it's the way that a lot of organisations are going because it's quite fashionable. I agree. But unless we get the drip down effect from the leadership of an organisation, it won't. No change will actually happen, and it either needs to be driven by an event or a series of events, or someone who's very vocal in an organisation to say, "Do you realise that you're at serious risk?" Perhaps from an HR perspective or a health and safety perspective. Or a leadership team that's very switched on. In the case of my organisation, it's chief constable that isn't just switched on, but lives and breathes it, which is quite interesting. He's very, very vocal on that, and as a result, that cultural change has sifted down to the rest of the organisation, whilst lots of things are going on in between.
I think Sue Chapman has put into the chat box something really, really pertinent. She agrees with you, Phil, but it's from I'm going to read it, Sue, word for word, but it's now it's moved. It should be from the top down, the middle out, and the bottom up, and it is. It's engaging everybody within the organisation, and I think, Susan, that's what you'll have found when you joined Suzuki, is it?
Yes, it was. Like I say, everybody is so helpful, and work colleagues actually look out for work colleagues. And like I say, I've worked there it was last year when I first went there, and there wasn't many people in the office, because of the situation. But those people that were in were very mindful of everybody else who'd come in as well. And it worked. But what I wanted to pick up on was what Laura was saying about having a framework. And she mentioned duty of care, and HR was mentioned. So from an HR perspective, if we get any kind of inkling that somebody is off or somebody is suffering mental health, it's straight away, like I say, it's addressed. It isn't left to fester. It's addressed then and there. And why? Because we have a duty of care. So again, we mentioned about trying to get the board to buy in. The risk is very high, and that's how I sell it to the business. We have to do this. We have to look into this. We have to investigate this. We have to see why this individual is suffering mental health. Is it a workplace issue? Has something triggered? So there is that duty of care, and there is that framework, and within HR, it is a high priority.
Yeah, and that's what I was getting at, Laura. Quite often it's driven by someone in your position, and that buy-in, if it isn't there with the leadership team, can happen. You can create that change at your level, but as we mentioned, the bottom-up approach is part of it. The middle-out approach is also part of it, but you can lose it because there's so much going on around you. Everybody thinks that there's a great understanding in your organisation, but it has to be driven by cultural change, and it's thinkers such as yourself, Susan, that actually make that happen. Especially if you're in a position to make that happen, which you are as HR director. Yeah. Often happens with health and safety directors, and that is the key. And everything else we're talking about are the tools that you need in your workplace to keep it going, if you like.
I've quite often had conversations, probably Laura, very similar as well, where they've gone, we need some training. Why? Oh, we need some mental health first aiders. Why? Can we have some training soon? Why? Well, because we need them. And you go around in this little circle for about 5 minutes before you go, have you got a plan? We need some mental health first aid trainers. Do you want to train them or not? And you have to have that very difficult question or the difficult conversation to say, no, I don't want to come in and train your people, even though it'll be revenue, because they'll just sit there and you won't do anything with them. If you're going to do something with them, have the plan at the beginning. We'll even help you. Laura and I will even help you write that plan so that you can incorporate 6 months down the line the training, so that you've got a criteria that you can address it against. Because if you haven't, you're just going to pay someone to do some training. And someone else wrote in the, I forgot about the training, you get an 11-to-1 investment just by training people. You get again, that buying. But if you haven't got the strategy in place, if you haven't got the plan in place, unfortunately, everything that Phil said there, the bottom up, the top down, the middle in, whichever, all those influences will ultimately just mean you'll have some very nicely well-trained people, but you won't know what to do with them. And I think that's really critical. And that's when we're talking about what's going to happen in 5, 10, 15 years time. We need to be putting the building blocks in place now for, I guess, the 5 and the 6-year-olds that are now studying in school. So when they came out, or when they come out of university and school, they're going to go, I want to go and work for company X because of this is their wellbeing policy and this is their mental health support plan. And if that's not in place, and you don't offer flexible working, and I can't work from a camper van, I'm not going to come and work for you. I'm going to go and work for someone over there. So we've really... Yeah,
I love this, Simon, because we, in one of our earlier conversations, about employment, we spoke about parative employment contract, so that there was not only was it the employer's employment contract, but it's the employee's employment contract. And it should be a two-way thing. I know certainly when I started work, I was petrified of an employment contract. I was absolutely petrified of an employment contract because I thought that was something being imposed on me and I had to conform to everything. What you're now saying is that my son, my 11-year-old son, making all the noise on Fortnite downstairs at the moment, he needs to be in 8 years' time in these businesses that are looking after every aspect of their life to make a rich, fulfilling, community-based life, giving back to everything. I think that's where we're going, isn't it?
And people have started to make life choices. People have started, I don't want to work 5 days in the office. I want a hybrid role. You told me I couldn't work from home for 10 years. I've now had to. I now want a bit of working from home. I want a bit of an office. You can't provide that for me? Fantastic. Competitor over here, they provide flexible work, and I'm going to go and work for them now, because we've seen that something is more important than the 9-to-5 drudgery. And our children, with that emotional, the EQ, the emotional quotient that they're going to come out with, they're going to see that there's more to life than just working. And if you can control that, or not control, but help them manage their work-life balance, you will attract them. And I think that's what it's going to be about. I mean, some organizations, unlimited holiday, work from wherever you want in the world, whenever you want to work. And they are just getting, they're hand over fist, the skills that they're being developed and the revenue that they're bringing in, because they offer a completely flexible lifestyle.
That's where I think where Susan was saying at the beginning, your kind of priority at the moment, those what we're referring to as return to work toolkits are so important, because as Simon said, so many people have had time to reflect. Many people haven't, but a lot of people have had time to reflect, reprioritize, or just recognize what their priorities are. And actually really this crunch time is what you're saying now about getting people back in the office, whatever that looks like for you guys. And we've ended up doing so many. It's been really interesting how unique everybody's return to work toolkits are that we've been working on, because of course it is totally different, and it's where the culture of the business comes through really clearly. And to Simon's point, I think what's really nice is when you as an individual and as an employee can see the connection between your values and the values of the business, and that's where those relationship and employee engagement are going to carry on. If there isn't that connection, or it's not clear in the return to work toolkit, or whatever the process is for that organization, that's where those decisions are going to be made quite quickly, I think, as to this isn't right for me. And as I say, this is where I think things will continue to change. But I don't think it'll be a case of 20 years people be wanting to flexible work from the camper. I think that's next year. I think that's happening now and straight away. I don't think that's something for the kids.
Susan, what were you going to add to that?
I was just going to say that, I've mentioned about, our next big challenge is getting people back into work. What we've done is we actually did a employee survey, and we give employees options as to how they wanted to come back and what they wanted more long term. So we're under a lot of pressure from Japan. They have a different culture, different outlook. They're hard workers. They want everybody back as soon as. And the challenge for us is well, that's not going to work at the moment because people are anxious. So we did a survey, we gave people options, what they wanted to do. And the feedback by, I think 96%, if I'm remembering correctly, was that people want to come back on a hybrid. So they don't want to come into the office every single day. They have chosen to get that work-life balance, and they want to spend some time at home as well as in the office. And for us, that's going to be our way forward.
Wow.
The employees have spoken, and we have to listen.
One of the questions which has been raised, and this is really pertinent, I think, to what's happened over the last 12 months. And I was reading an article by a gentleman called Dan Buettner about loneliness, for example, in old age or in any age, about how loneliness can be as damaging as smoking, for example. And I think what we've seen with the pandemic is this working from home, this creation, this possibility of this lack of water culture conversation and everything. What are your thoughts on loneliness? Is that something that you're going to tackle with your return to work policy, Susan? Is that something that's in there?
It's not, loneliness is something that we will have to tackle. But what we have found is that people, we've allowed people to come into work if they want to, and we've done that, throughout this pandemic. So if somebody feels that they really need to come into work, they can ring up their line manager or one of the directors and say, I want to come in for a day, just so that they get that human touch. But yes, loneliness is something that we'll have to overcome. It's changing everybody's mindset. It's getting them, there was that big turnaround getting people to work from home, feeling isolated. Now we've got to do the whole thing in the other direction and get them from feeling that isolation to now coming into a workplace, where there's 260 odd people going to be around the office and the noise and the mayhem, and we have to just be very mindful and very aware of the environment that we're bringing people back into.
Well, one of the things, following on from what you're saying, one of the things that I noticed with Phil's new organisation, or the work that Phil's done, is the provision of wellbeing rooms. And I'd not come across that. Mind you, I've been out of the corporate world for a little while, but just to have these almost these islands of serenity that are within a bustling building was really quite magical to see them, and they can be used for so many different purposes. It was brilliant. I'm really mindful of the time, and I know that we can carry on the conversation for an awful lot longer. The whole purpose of, or the end purpose of what I hoped we would achieve in this conversation, I think it's been really positive, and I hope everyone listening does as well, is what is the future of wellbeing going to look like in 10 to 20 years time. So I'm going to ask it just as a single line. I'm going to come to you, Simon, and put you on the spot, because I know how quickly you come up with a one-liner. Simon, what's the future of mental wellness in the workplace?
It has to be completely different than today. There has to be no stigma, no discrimination. It has to be part of you going to work. You take your whole self, your physical and your mental self. That what has to change.
Brilliant. Thank you, Simon. Susan.
Oh, put me on the spot.
So,
it has to improve. That's all. It has to improve. It just has to be a continuous improvement, and it has to be recognised in the same way a physical illness is recognised.
Thank you ever so much, Susan. Phil.
A lot of it's about the investment in time and the financial investment that you'll need to make as an organisation. If you're looking at where you need to be in 5, 10, 15 years' time, you need to look and understand what that investment is now. And whether that's to do with investing in your culture, whether that's to do investing in facilities, which is my background at the moment, and also investing time to think about what your staff are going to want in 10, 15, 20 years' time. Someone mentioned earlier on about what's happening in education at the moment, what the expectation is for the staff that you're going to be recruiting in 10, 15 years' time. They'll be coming out of school, college, university with a very, very different view of the world that we have. And if we want to be looking at attracting them, we need to be looking at what they're going to be expecting. If your organisation needs to be an employer of choice come 2031 or 2041.
Thanks, Phil. Laura.
I think there needs to be a greater understanding of the people that work for you. So I think the understanding of what's going on for everybody, not in a big brother level way, but an acknowledgement that everyone's an individual. But I think also there will be a change in terms of expectation. I kind of touched on it before about people aren't going to put up with stuff. I think actually 10, 20 years time, there won't be well-being strategies. There won't be businesses like Simon and I's. Actually, that's just how work is done. The culture will hopefully, very optimistic thinking here, the cultures will be actually seeing the benefit of it, seeing that's just the way of life. And actually it isn't a particular focus. It's just how you do business.
Brilliant, Laura. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I know things have changed massively for me over the last 18 months. What I used to do for how I used to run my operation was very rigid. I used to have to sit at a desk and make my phone calls. Bearing in mind I run my own business, but I used to sit here, and this was where I worked. This is what I did in front of a computer screen. I now spend the first hour and a half, 2 hours of the day making my phone calls out in the countryside. I now spend that sort of period of time out walking. I like yourselves, I speak on wellness and mental health as well. And this whole conversation this evening has been absolutely fascinating. So it just remains for me to wrap up the conversation. Thank everybody who's been on our panel. Laura, Phil, Simon and Susan, thank you so much for your time. For all of you listening and asking the questions, we've had so many questions and comments being raised. And I think a lot of the feeling that I'm getting back from from the questions that have been raised is about really having just a compassionate workplace, which is what Libby Morley said in the comments. And I think that we can echo that throughout it. It's about an understanding of our fellow human beings and actually making it a joy to go to work. I'm actually going to quote a figure, and Simon, I'm just watching your face now to see whether your mouth's going to turn up or turn down. He's heard me say this before, but 2,304 Monday mornings we have to get up in our working life, and I think if we can actually get to the position where we make Monday a really attractive day of the week, through everything that you've discussed this evening, I think that's going to be such a positive place to get to. We're back on the 1st of June with the future of sustainability. And then prior to the summer holidays, once Boris allows us to do whatever we're going to do on the summer holidays, we are then on the 6th of July going to have the future of retirement. Next week on Monday, the 10th of May, it welcomes the start of Mental Health Awareness Week. And we plan to carry on this conversation on our network. So that's the supportive back to nature networks that we have, where we carry on the conversation. So on Monday morning at 7 o'clock, Simon, we have you joining us. Susan has offered to come and join on the network as well. So has Laura on the Friday evening, and bizarrely, Laura, Phil and Susan all said Friday evening for a walk, and then possibly, depending on what Boris says, a trip to the pub to celebrate the week and carry on the conversation. I have now completely lost my notes, but we have our networks on a Monday and a Friday. Please do come along and join us on the network.live to reinvigorate yourself in a relaxed, supportive and informative environment. It only remains for me to say I'm Matthew Hoddenott. Thank you so much for this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure to have this conversation with all of you. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation. Thanks a lot and good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.